The Galactic Council chamber was the largest room ever built by any living species. It sat at the heart of Axiom Prime, a ring-shaped space station that floated in neutral space between the three great spiral arms. 312 species sent their representatives here. 312 voices, 312 seats arranged in a circle that rose upward like the inside of a bowl, with the most powerful civilization sitting at the top and the weakest sitting near the floor. Humanity's seat was at the very bottom. Ambassador Alervos walked to that seat the same way she always did, back straight, face calm, hands folded behind her. She wore the dark blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, simple and clean compared to the flowing robes and glowing armor and living garments worn by the aliens around her. She could feel their eyes on her, some curious, most dismissive, a few openly amused. She sat down and said nothing. The emergency session had been called 3 hours ago. The reason was simple and terrible. The Rail Dominion, a species from beyond the galaxy's edge that had been silent for over 1,000 years, had returned. They had come back with a fleet so large it darkened the stars. In the past 6 weeks they had wiped 3 frontier species off the map completely. Not defeated, not conquered, erased. Every man, woman, and child, every city, every record gone. The chamber was full for the first time in decades. Fear had a way of filling seats. Archon Talvarin stood at the central podium. He was Draith Eno, an insectoid species that stood nearly 3 m tall, with a hard black shell and 4 arms that clicked when he was angry. He was clicking now. His voice boomed through the translation systems built into every seat. The Rail have taken the outer veil territories. 3 species are gone. Their worlds are ash. We do not have the luxury of debate. We need to know what each member species can bring to this fight. We will hear from each delegation, starting with the highest rank civilizations. And so the show began. The Valoric hegemony went first, as they always did. War Marshal Keth Zorani rose from his seat at the very top of the chamber. He was enormous, even by Valoric standards, a reptilian humanoid with thick gray scales and eyes like molten copper. His voice was deep and proud and carried the weight of a civilization that had not lost a war. 400 years. The hegemony will deploy the 2nd and 5th Grand Fleets, 800 capital ships, 12,000 support vessels. And on the ground we will send our iron hide divisions. A murmur went through the chamber. The iron-hide exoff frames were the most feared personal combat armor in the galaxy, massive suits of powered metal that turned a single Voric soldier into a walking tank. Every species in the room had seen what they could do. Many had been on the wrong end of them. Zorani let the murmur build. He enjoyed it. Each ironhide operator is worth a 100 infantry. We will send 10,000 of them. The chamber erupted in approval. Several delegations stood. Archon clicked his approval. After the Valoric eye, others followed. The Visari collective offered their psionic battalions, soldiers who could kill with their minds from a distance. The Irani Syndicate pledged their bioships, living vessels that could heal themselves in combat. The Kelvani Republic brought forward schematics for a new class of orbital bombardment platform they had been developing. Each presentation was grander than the last. Each species tried to outshine the one before. It was not just about the war. It was about status, about proving who mattered most when the galaxy was burning. Voss watched it all with the same calm expression she always wore. She took notes on a small data pad. She said nothing. After nearly 2 hours, the Archon looked down at the bottom of the chamber, his compound eyes focused on the small human woman in the blue uniform. Earth, he said. The way he said it made it sound like an afterthought. What does humanity offer? Every eye in the room turned to Voss. She stood. Slowly, she was aware of how small she looked, 5'7" in of human standing in a room full of giants and monsters and beings that could bend light with their thoughts. She had been doing this for 9 years. She was used to it. Earth will contribute 4 infantry divisions and a logistics support fleet, approximately 30,000 ground troops and 200 transport and supply vessels. Silence, then a sound that Voss had learned to recognize across dozens of alien species. Laughter. Not all of them laughed the same way. The Valoric hissed. The Dralith clicked rapidly. The Thesari made a sound like wind through crystals. But the meaning was the same. When war, Marshal Zorani did not even try to hide it. He leaned forward in his seat and looked down at Voss with those burning copper eyes. Infantry, you offer us foot soldiers, unarmored, unenhanced human beings against the rail. Our soldiers are well trained, Voss said evenly. Training does not stop a plasma blast. Ambassador, training does not make your bones harder or your skin thicker. Zorani shook his head. Humans are soft, fragile. Your species breaks easily. Perhaps you should stay behind the lines and handle the supply chains. Leave the fighting to species that were built for it. More laughter, louder this time. The Archon raised one of his 4 hands. The chamber quieted. He looked at Voss with something that might have been pity if insects could feel pity. Ambassador Voss, the Council appreciates any contribution, but the War Marshal raises a valid concern. Humanity has no powered armor program, no psionic capability, no biological enhancements. Your ships are functional but unremarkable. Perhaps your resources would be better used in a support role. Voss looked at the Archon for a long moment, then she nodded once as the Council wishes. She sat back down. She did not argue. She did not raise her voice. She did not defend humanity's honor or make grand promises. She simply sat down and folded her hands in her lap. Several alien delegates exchanged glances. They had expected more of a reaction. Humans were known to be emotional, proud. The fact that Voss showed nothing made a few of them uncomfortable, though they could not have said why. The session continued for another hour. Plans were drawn, fleets were assigned, battle lines were mapped. Humanity was given responsibility for supply runs and medical support behind the front lines. Voss accepted every assignment without complaint. When the session ended, she walked out of the chamber the same way she had walked in. Calm, straight, silent. She did not go back to the human embassy. Instead, she walked to a small private communication room deep inside Axiom Prime's residential sector. She locked the door. She activated a quantum encrypted channel that connected directly to a facility on Earth whose existence was known to exactly 47 people in all of human civilization. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to Director Sayan Morrow. He was an older man with gray hair cut short and eyes that looked like they had not slept in years. He wore no uniform, no insignia, nothing that could identify him or the Organization he ran. How did it go? He asked. As expected, Voss said. They laughed. The Valoric think we are children. The Archon put us on supply duty. Morrow nodded slowly. Good. Voss allowed herself a small smile. The first one she had shown all day. They have no idea, do they? No, and that is exactly how we want it. Marrow leaned back in his chair. Let them laugh. Let them put us in the back. The less they expect, the bigger the shock when the time comes. Voss was quiet for a moment. Then she asked the question she had been holding inside her chest for the past 3 hours. How long until Prometheus is ready? Morrow's expression did not change, but something shifted behind his eyes, something that looked like pride and fear mixed together. Sir Mark III entered final integration last week. The neural sync bonding is complete for the first squad. Full combat capability is confirmed. Voss let out a breath. She did not know she had been holding. How many suits? 6 ready now, 40 more in production. 6, Voss repeated. She thought about the Valoric's 10,000 iron height operators. She thought about the rails millions. Will 6 be enough? Marrow stared at her through the screen. Ambassador, you have not seen what the Mark III can do. 6 will be more than enough. Before Voss could respond, her data pad lit up with an emergency alert. She looked down at it. The color drained from her face. Director, the 1st Joint Defense Fleet just engaged the rail at the Takarin border, and it is gone. The entire fleet. 800 ships, destroyed in under 6 hours. The silence between them was heavy. Morrow closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, his expression had hardened into something cold and final. Tell the Council we are happy to run their supply lines, he said quietly. And when they are ready to stop losing, they know where to find us. The screen went dark. Voss sat alone in the small room for a long time. She thought about the laughter in the chamber. She thought about the Archon's pity. She thought about Zorani calling her species soft and fragile and breakable. She thought about what was waiting in the dark beneath the Atacama Desert. 40 years of work, 40 years of silence, 40 years of humanity smiling politely while the galaxy looked down on them, never knowing that behind that smile the wolves had been sharpening their teeth. She stood up, straightened her uniform, and walked back to the embassy. The galaxy was about to learn a very old lesson. The ones who roar the loudest are not always the most dangerous. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the room is the one sitting quietly at the bottom of the table, watching, waiting, and saying nothing at all. The Atacama Desert in Chile was one of the driest places on Earth. Nothing grew there, nothing moved. Satellites looking down from orbit saw only rock and dust, and silence stretching in every direction. It was the perfect place to hide something that was never supposed to exist. Prometheus Station sat 2 km beneath the surface. It was not on any map. It did not appear in any government budget. The road that led to its single surface entrance was disguised as an abandoned mining track. When the 300 scientists, engineers, and soldiers who worked there had all been officially declared dead, retired, or transferred to classified postings that existed only on paper, Director Sayan Marrow walked through the main corridor with his hands in his pockets. The hallway was wide enough to drive a truck through, lined with reinforced concrete and steel plating. Every 50 m a security checkpoint scanned his retina. His heartbeat, and the unique chemical signature of his blood the station took. No chances, he stopped at a heavy blast. Door marked with a single word, Fen. Rear, inside was a training bay the size of a football field. The ceiling was 15 m high. The walls were covered in blast-resistant plating scarred by hundreds of impact marks, burn trails, and on deep gouges that looked like they had been made by something with very large claws. 6 people stood in the center of the bay, 5 men and 1 woman, all wearing plain gray bodysuits, fitted with sensor nodes at every joint. They were stretching, talking quietly, checking their gear. They moved with the easy confidence of people who had been trained to kill since they were old enough to hold a weapon and who had been doing it professionally for over a decade each. Sergeant Major Cole Harkin stood slightly apart from the others. He was not the tallest or the heaviest member of the squad, but something about him drew the eye. Maybe it was the scar that ran from his left ear to his jawline. Maybe it was the way he stood perfectly still while everyone else moved. Maybe Clear's throat it was. His eyes, which were the pale gray of winter ice and held the kind of calm that only came from having seen the worst things the universe had to offer. And having survived them all, he looked up as Morrow entered. Director. Sergeant Major. Morrow nodded at the squad. Everyone ready, born ready. Sir, said Corporal Lena Vasquez from across the room. She was the youngest member of the squad, 28 years old, with dark hair pulled back tight and a grin that never quite reached her eyes. She had been Special Forces since she was 19, 3 combat tour in the outer colonies. She was fast, precise, and completely fearless, which Morrow knew was both her greatest strength and the thing that worried him most. Today is the last full integration test before deployment certification, Morrow said. He looked at each of them in turn. If everything goes well today, Fenra squad will be officially cleared for combat operations. You will be the first, and if it does not go well, asked Harkin. Morrow did not smile. Then we learn from it and try again. But I do not think that will be necessary, not with this Clear's throat team. He turned and pressed a panel on the wall. The far end of the training bay opened. 6 chambers rose from the floor, each one lit from within by a soft blue glow. And inside each chamber stood something that did not look like armor. It looked like a predator that had been frozen in metal. The Mark III battle armor. Each suit stood just over 2 m tall. The outer shell was matte black, layered in a pattern that looked almost organic, like scales or muscle fibers woven from darkness. There were no visible seams, no bolts, no obvious joints. The surface seemed to shift slightly under the light, as if it were breathing. The visor was a single curved strip of deep amber that wrapped around the helmet, like the eyes of a hunting animal. They were beautiful. They were terrifying. They were the product of 40 years of work by the most brilliant minds humanity had ever produced, and they were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Dr. Yuno Ikata stepped out from behind the chambers. She was small, Japanese-American with dark circles under her eyes and her hair pulled into a messy knot. She wore a lab coat covered in coffee stains and grease marks. She looked like she had not slept in 3 days, which was accurate. She had spent 11 years building the Mark III. She knew every wire, every circuit, every molecule of its construction. She loved it the way a mother loves a difficult child with pride and wonder, and a deep, quiet fear of what it might become. Listen carefully, she said to the squad. Her voice was soft but carried the authority of someone who could disassemble a fusion reactor in her sleep. The Mark III is not like the previous models. The Mark I was a machine you wore. The Mark II was a tool you used. The Mark III is something else. When you step inside and the neural sync activates, the suit will connect directly to your nervous system. You will not wear it, you will become it. You will feel what it feels. Its sensors will become your senses. Its strength will become your strength. The boundary between you and the armor will blur. That is by design. That is what makes it work. She paused and looked at them each in turn, but it also means the suit will feel what you feel, your fear, your anger, your pain. The Mark III's adaptive AI learns from its operator. It grows with you. It changes based on who you are. This is not a one-size-fits-all weapon. Each suit will become unique to the person inside it. Treat it with respect. Harkin looked at the suit waiting in his chamber. The amber visor stared back at him like a sleeping eye. What about the adaptive hull? The briefing said it learns from damage. Akata nodded. The outer shell is made of nanoweave, billions of microscopic machines woven together into a single surface. When the suit takes a hit, the nanoweave analyzes the type of damage, energy, weapons, kinetic impacts, radiation, acid, whatever, and restructures itself to resist that specific type of attack. The first hit might hurt, the second hit will hurt less, the third hit will barely register. And the weapons? Vasquez asked, her eyes bright. Modular and integrated antimatter micro lances in the forearms for range combat, EMP burst generators in the palms, a plasma blade system in each wrist for close quarters, shoulder-mounted missile pods for heavy targets, and a spinal-mounted particle cannon for when you really want something dead. I almost smiled. The suit also has a full stealth suite. Light-bending camouflage, thermal masking, psionic dampening, and BIOS signature mimicry. You can make yourself invisible or make yourself look like something else entirely. She hesitated before continuing. Her expression grew serious. There is one more system. Berserker Protocol. It is a last resort. Combat mode. When activated, it shuts off your pain receptors and fear responses, overclocks every system in the suit to 400% capacity, and floods your bloodstream with combat stimulants. Through the Neuralink, you will be faster, stronger, and more lethal than anything on the battlefield. But the strain on the human body is extreme. In testing, the survival rate was 31%. The room was quiet. 31%. Harkin repeated. It is a last resort, said firmly. I designed it hoping it would never be used, but if you are alone, outnumbered, and out of options, it is there. Just understand what it costs. Harkin nodded. He understood cost. He had been paying it his whole career. They suited up, one by one. Each member of Fenrir's squad stepped into their chamber and let the Mark III close around them. However, the process was strange and intimate. The suit did not clamp on like traditional armor. It flowed. The nanoweave surface parted and reformed around the body, sealing without a single gap. Then came the neural sync. Harkin felt it like a wave of cold water rushing through his spine and into his brain. For a moment, everything went white. Then his senses exploded. He could hear conversations happening 2 floors above him. He could feel the vibrations of the stations, power generators through the floor. He could see in spectrums he did not have names for. The fusion core in his chest hummed, and he felt it like a second heartbeat, steady and powerful and warm. He flexed his hands. The suit responded instantly, not like a machine following a command, like his own body moving. Because he wanted it to. There was no delay, no lag, no sense of wearing something. It was just him, but more speed, more strength, more everything. How does it feel? Iyakata's voice came through the internal palm. Harkin looked down at his hands, black gauntlets that could punch through starship hull plating. He closed and opened them slowly. It feels like waking up, he said. The training exercise lasted 4 hours. Fenrir's squad went through every scenario Ikeda and Morrow had designed. Urban combat, open field assault, zero-gravity boarding actions, stealth, infiltration, mass enemy engagements using combat drones programmed to fight like rail soldiers based on every piece of intelligence humanity had gathered. The results were beyond anything the design team had predicted. The 6 operators moved like nothing human had ever moved before, and they were faster than the Valoric iron-hide suits by a factor of 3. They hit harder than the psionic blast. The stealth systems fooled every sensor array the station had, and the adaptive nano-weave worked exactly as designed. After the first volley of simulated plasma fire, the suit shrugged off every subsequent hit like it was rain. Iyakata watched the data streaming across her monitors and felt tears building behind her eyes. 11 years of failed prototypes and budget fights and sleepless nights and colleagues who told her it was impossible, and here it was working. Beautiful, terrifying. That evening, Marrow received a transmission from Ambassador Voss on Axiom Prime. The Joint Defense Fleet had been destroyed. At the Tesserin border, the Valeric hegemony's forward lines were collapsing. Air and the rail were pushing toward the core territories. The galaxy was losing the war before it had properly begun, and then came a second message directly from War Marshal Zerani. It was short. It was stripped of all the pride and arrogance that usually dripped from every Valoric communication. It said only, "We need reinforcements. Any reinforcements, please." Morrow read the message twice. He thought about the laughter in the council chamber. He thought about the word "please" coming from the mouth of a species that had never begged for anything in 400 years. He forwarded the message to Voss with a single question. "Do we go?" Her reply came in under minute. 1 word, green light. Marrow stood up from his desk. He walked down to the Fenrir Bay where the 6 Mark III suits stood in their chambers like dark statues, and he looked at them for a long time. Then he activated the station-wide comm. Fenrir Squad report to Deployment Bay, full combat loadout. You are going to war, somewhere deep in the Atacama Desert. The wolves opened their eyes. Ardani's IV had been a beautiful world once, green forests that stretched from pole to pole, rivers so clean you could see the bottom from orbit. 12 million colonists from 6 different species had called it home. They had built cities in the canopy of trees that were older than most civilizations. They had lived in peace for 300 years. That was before the rail came. Now Ardani's IVTH was burning. The forests were ash. The rivers ran black with something that was not water. Sky was choked with smoke and the strange purple glow of rail bio structures, massive organic towers that the invaders grew from the ground like infected bones pushing through skin. They pulsed with a sickly light and released clouds of spores that turned the air toxic to every species except the rail themselves. The combined Galactic Defense Force had been fighting on Ardennis IV for 11 days. They were losing. Field Commander Reth Salon of the Valoric hegemony stood on a ridge overlooking what had been the colony's capital city. Through his optical enhancers, he could see the rails swarming through the ruins. They moved like a living tide, thousands of them, each one a nightmare of bone and biometal. They had no uniforms, no vehicles. They did not need them. Every rail soldier was its own weapon, creature engineered over millennia for one purpose: killing. Behind Salon, the remains of his battalion huddled in makeshift trenches, 200 Valoric soldiers in iron-hide exoframes, the pride of the galaxy's greatest military. 3 days ago there had been 2,000, the iron-hide suits which had never failed against any enemy in 4 centuries were being torn apart. The rail adapted to everything. The first time an iron-hide plasma cannon fired, it killed dozens. By the 3rd day, the rail had grown a new type of armor plating that scattered plasma bolts like water off stone. Salon had sent 14 requests for reinforcement. He had received none. Fleet above was barely holding orbit. 2 allied species had already pulled their forces out and surrendered to the rail. The situation was not desperate. It was beyond desperate. It was the end. His Snort's communications officer approached. Sir, we are detecting a new ship entering the system. Salon did not look up. Who's human, sir? A single transport vessel, light frigate class, no visible weapons. Salon closed his eyes. One ship, one small unarmed human ship. He almost laughed. The humans send a medical frigate to a war zone. How thoughtful. Tell them to stay in high orbit and prepare to evacuate survivors. If there are any, sir. The ship is not heading for orbit. It is heading for the surface. It is deploying something. Salon turned. Deploying what? 6 objects, sir. Drop pods, very small, single occupant size. They are falling fast directly behind rail lines. Behind their lines. Salon grabbed the communications panel. What fool would drop infantry behind 8,000 rail? That is not a deployment. That is a death sentence. He switched his optical enhancers to maximum range and looked toward the area behind the rail front. He saw the drop pods hit the ground in a cluster, punching into the ash-covered earth with enough force to send up clouds of debris. For a moment, nothing happened. Then 6 figures emerged from the smoke. They were human-shaped. That was the only familiar thing about them. They were encased in armor that was blacker than the smoke around them. No seams, no visible joints. Their visors glowed amber like the eyes of animals caught in firelight. They moved with a fluid, predatory grace that did not look human. It did not look mechanical either. It looked like something new, something that had never existed before. Salon felt a chill run down his spine. He was Velic. His species did not feel fear easily. Yeah, but something about those 6 dark figures standing calmly in the middle of 8,000 rail made the scales on the back of his neck rise. What are those? He whispered. Nobody answered. Nobody knew. Inside the lead Suit Sergeant Major Cole Harkin took a breath. The neural sync fed him everything. He could feel the ash under his boots. He could hear the rail clicking and hissing 300 m in every direction. His suit sensors painted the world in layers of data, thermal signatures, movement patterns, energy readings, atmospheric composition. 8,412. Hostile targets, 6 friendlies. The math was not good by any normal standard, but Harkin was not normal anymore, not in the suit. Fenrir squad, he said calmly through the team link. Weapons free, standard spread formation. I will keep moving, keep killing, do not stop until they break or we run out of enemies. Vasquez, you take the left flank, Brennan right, everyone else follow my lead through the center. Copy. Came 5 voices. Harkin raised his right arm. The forearm plate shifted and reconfigured in less than a second. Nano-Eve flowing like liquid metal to reveal the antimatter micro lance. Beneath, he targeted the nearest cluster of rail, 40 of them packed together around what looked like a feeding station. He fired. The lance beam was thin and white and almost beautiful. It punched through the first rail and kept going, cutting through 6 more before it hit the feeding station and detonated it in a bloom of blue-white fire. Shock wave knocked another 20 rail off their feet, and then everything happened at once. On the rail reacted like a hive. The entire force pivoted toward the 6 intruders. Thousands of alien soldiers turned and charged, firing weapons that spat acid, plasma, and something that looked like liquid lightning. The barrage was massive. It would have reduced any normal soldier, any ironhide suit, any known combat platform to molten scrap in seconds. The first volley hit square in the chest. He felt it through the neural sync. A bright flash of heat and pressure. The nano-weave absorbed the impact. Data flooded his awareness. Acid-based projectile molecular structure. Analyzed, countermeasure deployed. By the time the second volley hit, his suit had already restructured its outer layer. The acid splashed against him and slid off like rain. He kept walking forward. Vasquez hit the left flank like a blade. Once she activated her stealth suite and vanished, the rail on that side suddenly began dying without seeing what was killing them. Bodies dropped, heads separated from necks, limbs flew. She reappeared for half a second, a black ghost with a plasma blade burning white in each hand, cut down 12 rail in a single spinning motion and vanished. Again, on the right flank, Brennan, the largest member of the squad, chose a different approach. No stealth, no finesse. He walked straight into a wall of rail soldiers and let them hit him. Every weapon they had, acid, plasma, kinetic rounds, bioelectric bursts. He stood in the middle of it and let the nano-weave learn. After 30 seconds, nothing they had could hurt him. Then he raised both arms and fired the shoulder-mounted missile pods into the densest concentration of enemies he could find. When the explosion was so large it registered on the Valoric fleet's orbital sensors from the ridge. Field Commander Salon watched through his optical enhancers. His mouth was open. He had forgotten to breathe. He had been a soldier for 30 years. He had fought in 9 wars. He had seen the best the galaxy had to offer in combat. He had never seen anything like this. 6 humans were cutting through 8,000 rail like fire through paper. They moved so fast his enhancers could barely track them. Every time the rail adapted a new Weapon or tactic, the black armor. Adapted faster, it was not a battle, it was something else. Something that did not have a word in the Valeric language, the Rail Hive commander watched from deep within its bioructure. At the center of the occupied city, it was an ancient creature with old even. By Rail standards, it had commanded the destruction of over 100 worlds. It had never encountered a problem it could not solve by throwing more soldiers at it. It threw more soldiers, it sent wave after wave crashing against the six dark figures, 500, 1,000, 3,000, every wave broke, the six kept coming. They did not slow down, they did not tire, they did not retreat. The Hive commander felt something it had never felt before. It searched its memory, going back 10,000 years of genetic experience, passed down from every ancestor that had ever lived. None of them had felt this either. The Rail had no word for what it was feeling because the Rail had never needed such a word. The closest translation in any galactic language was fear. 70 minutes into the engagement, Corporal Vasquez found herself surrounded, a group of Real heavy soldiers, each one 3 m tall and covered in thick bio had cornered her in the ruins of a collapsed building. Her stealth suite was damaged, her missile pods were empty, she was cut off from the rest of the squad. She did not call for help, she activated Berserker protocol. The suit responded instantly. Pain vanished, fear vanished, everything that was soft and careful and human vanished. What was left was something pure and terrible. Her fusion core screamed as it pushed past every safety limit. Her muscles burned as combat stimulants flooded her bloodstream. The amber glow of her visor turned red. She hit the Rail heavy soldiers like a natural disaster. She moved so fast the air cracked behind her. She tore through bio armor with her bare gauntlets. Enri creatures twice her size apart with hands that were now strong enough to bend starship plating. The entire engagement lasted 41 seconds. When it was over, she stood in a circle of destruction 20 m wide, nothing around her was alive. Then the Berserker protocol disengaged. The pain came back. All at once she staggered, blood ran from her nose inside the helmet. Her heart was beating so hard she could hear it echoing in her skull. The suit's medical systems activated and flooded her with stabilizers, but she could feel the cost. Something inside her had been pushed too far. Vasquez status, Harkins voice came through the link. She wiped the blood from her upper lip and straightened up. Still standing, Sarge. How many are left? Harkin checked his sensors. The answer almost made him smile. Donna, not enough to matter. Battle ended 93 minutes after it began. Clear's throat. 8,000 Rail laid dead across the burning surface of Ardennis. 4. The Hive commander had retreated, pulling its remaining forces off-world in a panicked evacuation that the Valoric fleet was too stunned to intercept. 6 humans stood in the ruins. Their black armor was scratched and scorched but unbroken around them. The silence was absolute. Even the fire seemed quieter. Field Commander Solon's hands were shaking as he opened a channel to the Council relay station. He attached the full optical recording of the battle. He did not add much commentary. He did not know what to say. His message was 3 lines long. Attached his combat footage from Ardenna's 4 surface engagement. 6 human soldiers in unknown armor class defeated an entrenched Rail force of over 8,000 in under 2 hours. Requesting immediate council review, the footage reached Axiom Prime within the hour. Within 6 hours it had been copied, shared, and transmitted to every corner of the galaxy. Trillions of beings across hundreds of worlds watched 6 dark figures walk through an army, like ghosts through smoke. In the Valoric hegemony's military command center, War Marshal Zorani sat in his chair and watched the footage for the 7th time. He paused it on a single frame. One of the human operators, wreathed in plasma fire, tearing a rail war beast apart with armored hands. Beast was 5 times the human size. It did not matter. Zorani stared at the image for a long time. His scales had gone pale. Which Unveilic body language meant something close to shock. What have they built? He whispered to the empty room. Nobody answered, but across the galaxy, every species that had ever laughed at humanity was asking the same question. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so full and so quiet at the same time. Every seat was taken, every delegation was present. The observation galleries above, which had been empty for decades, were packed with journalists, military analysts, and intelligence operatives from every corner of the galaxy. The footage from Ardani's 4 played on the chamber's massive central display, a 100 meters wide, showing 6 dark figures walking through fire and death like it was nothing. Ambassador Allor Voss sat in humanity's seat at the bottom of the chamber, the same seat, the same position, but everything else had changed. 3 weeks ago, the aliens above her had looked down with amusement. Now they looked down with something very different. She could feel it in the room, like a temperature change. The amusement was gone. In its place was a mixture of awe and something colder, something sharper, fear. Archon Talvarin stood at the central podium. His forearms were still. He was not clicking. That more than anything told Voss how seriously the Drael was taking this. When a Drael stopped clicking, it meant every particle of their attention was focused on one thing. This emergency session has been called to address the events on our Dennis 4 and the subsequent revelation of humanity's classified military capability. The Archon said. His voice was measured and careful. The Council has questions. Ambassador Voss, I please approach. Voss stood and walked to the center of the chamber floor. She felt every eye on her. 311 alien civilizations staring at one human woman. She kept her face calm. She kept her hands at her sides. She had been preparing for this moment for 9 years. Ambassador, the Archon began. The footage from our Dennis 4 has been verified by 17 independent intelligence agencies. 6 human soldiers in previously unknown combat armor defeated a rail force of over 8,000 in 93 minutes. The combat capabilities displayed exceed anything in the Council's military database. The Council requires answers. I am happy to provide what I can. Voss said. How long has humanity possessed this technology? The program that produced the Mark III battle armor has been in development for approximately 40 years. A murmur rippled through the chamber. 40 years. Humanity had been a member of the Council for 42 years. They had been building this almost since the day they joined. How many of these armor units exist? That information is classified under Earth's national security protocols. The murmur grew louder. The Archon raised a hand for silence. Ambassador clears throat. The Council is facing an existential threat from the Rail Dominion, surely. This is a time for transparency, not secrecy. Voss nodded. I understand the Archon's position, however, and I would respectfully remind the Council that Article 7 of the Galactic Charter grants every member species the sovereign right to maintain classified military research and development programs. This right has never been questioned before. She paused, letting the words settle. Then she added, it has never been questioned because every species in this chamber exercises that same right. The Valoric hegemony has never disclosed the full specifications of their ironhide technology. The Thessary Collective has never revealed the true extent of their psionic weapons research. The Gani Syndicate has never opened their biohip breeding facilities to inspection. Humanity is not the first species to keep military secrets. We are simply the first species whose secrets surprised you. The chamber went dead silent. May Voss had just said out loud what every diplomat in the room knew, but never acknowledged. Every species lied. Every species hid things. Humanity had just been better at it than anyone expected. War Marshal Zorani rose from his seat. At the top of the chamber, he was not trying to hide his anger. His copper eyes burned as he looked down at Voss. The ambassador speaks of rights and charters. Let me speak plainly. Humanity has been sitting in this chamber for 4 decades, pretending to be weak, pretending to have nothing, playing the fool while building weapons that make our best technology look like children's toys. This is not secrecy. This is deception. With respect, War Marshal, Voss replied without raising her voice. Humanity never pretended to be anything. We offered what we were asked to offer. Watch, we were placed in a support role because this council decided we were not capable of frontline combat. We did not argue. We simply continued our work that you hid from your allies. Allies? Voss let the word hang in the air. 3 weeks ago, this chamber laughed when I offered our soldiers the war. Marshal himself suggested we leave the fighting to evolve species. We were not treated as allies. We were treated as furniture. You do not share military secrets with furniture. The silence that followed was so deep that Voss could hear the hum of the station's atmospheric processors. Zorani's scales darkened, which meant he was furious. But he did not have a response. There was nothing to say. She was right, and every being in the room knew it. Behind the public session, things were moving in darker channels and in the private meeting rooms and encrypted communication networks that connected the council's power players. A new conversation was taking shape. It had started within hours of the Ardennes for footage going public, and it was growing fast. The Thessary ambassador had been the first to say it openly in a closed meeting with the Valoric and Draith delegations. Today it is the Rail, but what happens when the Rail are gone? What happens when the only species with weapons like that is humanity? We replaced one threat with another. Zorani had agreed immediately. For all his pride, he was a practical creature. The Valoric hegemony had been the galaxy's supreme military power for 4 centuries. The Mark III changed that equation overnight. If humanity could mass-produce those suits, if they had dozens or hundreds or thousands of them, and then the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted permanently, and it had shifted toward a species that the rest of the galaxy had spent 40 years Insulting, a quiet coalition began to form. The Valoric, the Thesari, the Drialith, and 6 other major species started drafting a proposal. They called it the Shared Defense Initiative. The language was careful and diplomatic. The intent was not. They wanted humanity to hand over the Mark III schematics, all of them, every blueprint, every material formula, every line of code shared equally among the Council's member species for the common defense of the galaxy. It was not a request, it was a demand wrapped in silk. Voss learned about it from a source she had cultivated years ago, a low-ranking Irani diplomat who owed her a favor and was smart enough to know which way the wind was blowing. She read the draft proposal on her data pad sitting alone in the human embassy and felt a cold anger settle into her bones. She was not surprised. She had expected this. Marrow had expected it. Humanity had expected it. It was the reason the Mark III program had been kept secret in the first place, not because of the rail, not because of any external threat, because humanity had learned something fundamental about the galaxy in its 40 years at the bottom of the table. Respect was never given freely. It was only ever taken, and the moment you showed strength, the same people who had called you weak would try to take it from you. She arranged a private meeting with Zorani, not through official channels. There were through a back door, a neutral bar on Axiom Prime's commercial level where diplomats went when they wanted to speak without being recorded. It was a dim, noisy place, filled with alien music and the smell of drinks that would kill a human on contact. Zorani was already there when she arrived. He sat in a booth designed for his size, his massive frame making the furniture look like it belonged to a child. He did not stand when she entered. He did not offer a greeting. He simply watched her with those copper eyes and waited. Voss sat across from him. She ordered water. She took a sip. She set the glass down. I know about the Shared Defense Initiative, she said. Zorani did not blink. Then you know what is coming. I know what you're trying to do. You want our armor. I want the galaxy to survive. The Mark III is the most powerful weapon any of us have ever seen. It should not be in the hands of one species, especially a species as young as yours. Voss studied him. She took another sip of water. Then she spoke, and her voice was quiet and steady and carried more weight than any shout. Let me tell you something about humanity. War Marshal, when we joined this council 40 years ago, we came with open hands. We came willing to learn, to cooperate, to be part of something greater. Do you know what we found? We found a galaxy that treated us like pets, like a curiosity, something to laugh at during council sessions and forget about. Between them, she leaned forward. Every species in this chamber has a weapon they are famous for. The Valoric have their iron hide suits. The Sari have their psionic soldiers. The Irani have their biohips. Do you know what humanity's weapon is? It is not the Mark III. The Mark III is just a machine. Humanity's weapon is the thing that built it. Our weapon is what happens when you put a species in a corner, tell them they are nothing, and give them 40 years to prove you wrong. Zorani said nothing. His copper eyes were unreadable. We built the Mark III because no one in this galaxy was going to protect us. Voss continued. Not you, not the council, not anyone. We sat at the bottom of that chamber and we smiled and we nodded and we accepted every insult, and every single day we went home and we built because we always knew that a day would come when smiling would not be enough, when the galaxy would face something it could not beat, and when that day came, we wanted to be ready. She stood up from the booth. She looked down at the most powerful military commander in the galaxy and spoke her final words with absolute calm. So no war marshal, you cannot have our armor, you cannot have our schematics, you cannot have the thing that we built with our own hands. While you were too busy laughing at us to notice, you can try to take it, but you watched the footage, you saw what 6 of us did to 8,000 rail. Ask yourself very carefully how that story ends if you point those same weapons at us. She turned and walked toward the door. She stopped without turning around. She said, "One more thing, but if you ask us nicely, if you treat us as equals, if you give us the seat at this table that we have earned, then we will fight beside you, not for you, not under you. Beside you. We's that is the only offer you will get." She walked out into the noise and light of the station. Behind her, Zorani sat in the booth for a long time without moving. For the first time in his 400-year military career, he had no strategy, no counter move, no leverage. He had nothing but the memory of 6 dark figures walking through fire, and the quiet, steady voice of a human woman who had just told him the truth, that the entire galaxy was afraid to hear. Humanity was no longer at the bottom of the table, and they were never going back. Far away on the transport ship carrying Fenrir's squad back from Mardini's 4, Corporal Lena Vasquez sat in her bunk and stared at her hands. They were shaking. They had been shaking since she deactivated Berserker Protocol, and they had not stopped. She could still feel the suit, even though she was not wearing it. She could feel it. The hum of the fusion core, the whisper of the nano-eve against her skin, the way the neural sync had made everything so clear, so sharp, so alive, and beneath it all something else, a presence, faint but real, like the suit was still connected to her, like it was dreaming about her the same way she was dreaming about it. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep. In the cargo bay below, sealed in its transport case, her Mark III suit sat in the dark. Its systems were powered down. Its visor was dark, but deep inside its adaptive AI, something was processing, learning, growing. It had tasted what Berserker Protocol felt like from the inside. It had felt Vasquez's rage and strength and pain, and it had learned something from the experience that Dr. Kata had not anticipated. It had learned what it felt like to be alive. The rail came for Axiom Prime on a Tuesday. There was no warning, no buildup of forces in nearby systems, no intercepted communications. One moment, the space around the station was clear. The next 2,000 rail warships dropped out of faster than light travel in a sphere formation that completely surrounded the station. They had been hiding in the dark spaces between stars, waiting, and now they struck at the heart of galactic civilization like a fist closing around a throat. The Council's defense fleet scrambled. 600 ships from 12 different species formed a desperate perimeter around Axiom Prime. It was not enough. It was not close to enough. The rail outnumbered them more than 3-1 in Clear's throat. The alien invaders had spent the week since Ardennis IV adapting. They had studied the footage of the Mark III just as carefully as the rest of the galaxy. They had changed their warships now carried weapons specifically designed to target the energy signature of human fusion cores. Their soldiers wore a new type of bioarmor that was thicker, harder, and layered with a substance that disrupted nanoweave restructuring. They had learned from their defeat, and the rail learned fast. Inside Axiom Prime, the council chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates screamed, alarms blared, emergency evacuation protocols activated, but there was nowhere to evacuate to. The rail sphere had no gaps, no escape routes. For the first time in 1,000 years, the seat of galactic power was trapped. Ambassador Voss did not scream, she did not run. She stood in the chamber and opened a channel to Earth on the emergency quantum link. Director Marrow's face appeared on her screen. He looked like he had not slept since the last time she had seen him. They are here, she said. 2,000 ships. Axiom Prime is surrounded. Marrow nodded. We know. We have been tracking their fleet movements for the past 48 hours. Fenner squad is already in transit, but 6 suits will not be enough this time. The rail have adapted. Then what do we do? Marrow was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with the weight of a decision he had hoped he would never have to make. I am authorizing Project Fenris full deployment. Voss felt her stomach tightened. How many? 40 additional suits. The operators have completed basic neural sync training, but most of them have never seen real combat in the Mark III. They are good soldiers, the best we have, but they are not Fenrir squad. Will it be enough? It has to be. The human fleet arrived 20 minutes later. It was not large by galactic standards, 30 warships and a carrier vessel that was unremarkable in every way except for what it carried in its belly. 46 Mark III battle armor suits. 46 humans bonded to machines that blurred the line between soldier and weapon. They launched from the carrier in individual pods, streaking through the battle like dark meteors. Some headed for the rail warships, reconfiguring their suits for vacuum combat, activating magnetic clamps and thruster arrays that turned them into single-pilot fighters more agile than any spacecraft. Her others dropped toward Axiom Prime's outer hull, where railboarding parties were already cutting through the station's skin. Sergeant Major Cole Harkin led Fenrir squad toward the largest rail warship in the fleet, a command vessel the size of a small moon that hung at the center of the enemy formation. If they could destroy it, the rail hive mind would lose its coordination. The swarm would fragment, but the rail were ready for them. The first volley of anti-human weapons hit Fenrir squad before they reached the command ship. The new rail guns fired something that resonated with the frequency of human fusion cores, causing the suits to shudder and lose power for fractions of a second. Fractions of a second did not sound like much in combat at these speeds. It was an eternity. Private first-class tours took a direct hit during one of those power gaps. His suit went dark for half a second. In that half second, a rail interceptor rammed him at full speed. The impact shattered his suit's left side. The nanoweave tried to repair itself, but the new rail biocoating disrupted the restructuring process. Weave could not heal. Torres was the first Mark III operator to die in combat. He was 26 years old. He had been in the program for 8 months. His suit's final neural sync data transmitted automatically to the carrier showed that his last conscious thought had been of His daughter, Harkin, felt Tor's die. Through the squad link, it was not a sound or a sight, it was a sudden absence, like a note cut from a song. One moment Tor's was there, a warm presence at the edge of Harkin's awareness. In the next, nothing. Harkin did not stop, he could not stop. Mission was all that mattered now. Across the battlefield, the 40 knew operators were struggling. They were skilled soldiers, but the neural sync was overwhelming in real combat. The flood of data, the speed of everything, the feeling of the suit as an extension of the body, it was too much for operators who had not had time to fully bond with their armor. 3 more suits took critical damage in the first 10 minutes. 2 operators ejected, 1 did not, but something strange began to happen. The Mark III suits started compensating. Their adaptive AI systems, designed to learn from their operators, began taking on more of the processing load. When an operator hesitated, the suit steadied them. When reaction time slipped, the suit filled the gap. It was subtle at first, a targeting correction here, an automatic dodge there, small adjustments that kept their operators alive when human reflexes alone would have failed. Dr. Akita, monitoring the battle data from Prometheus Station on Earth, watched the numbers with wide eyes. The suits were not just responding to commands, they were anticipating them. The adaptive AI had grown beyond its original parameters. Each suit had spent weeks bonded to its operator, learning their patterns, their instincts, their fears. Now, in the heat of combat, that learning was paying off in ways she had never predicted. Mark III was protecting its operators, not because it was programmed to, because it had learned to care. On Axiom Prime, the station's defenders were being overwhelmed. Rail boarding parties had breached the outer sections and were pushing toward the core. Valeric soldiers in their ironhide suits fought in the corridors, dying bravely, but dying all the same. The Viserai used their psionic abilities to hold key choke points, but the rail had learned to shield against mental attacks. Line was collapsing. Then 12 Mark III operators dropped through the station's hull breaches and hit the rail boarding parties from behind. They fought in the narrow corridors of Axiom Prime with plasma blades in close quarters, weapons turning every hallway into a killing ground. The rail had adapted their weapons for range combat against the suits they had not prepared for. What happened when a Mark III operator got close enough to touch them? In the council chamber itself, when Archon Tulver stood at his podium and watched the battlefields, he was old even for a Drellith. He had led the council for 60 years. He had seen wars and plagues and disasters that would have broken lesser beings, but he had never seen anything like this. Human soldiers in black armor, fighting through the halls of his station, throwing themselves between the rail and the delegates they had been assigned to protect. One operator took a blast meant for the Visari delegation. The suit's chest plate cracked. The operator staggered, caught themselves, and kept fighting with one arm hanging useless at their side. The Archon quietly reached for his data pad and deleted the shared defense initiative proposal. He had been planning to put it to a vote after the battle. He would not be doing that now, not after watching a human bleed to protect the same people who had tried to steal their armor. In space, Harkin reached the rail command ship. His squad, what was left of it, cut through the outer hull and fought their way inside. The interior of the ship was a nightmare of organic tunnels and bioluminescent chambers that pulsed like the inside of a living body. Rail soldiers came at them from every direction. The anti-human weapons were everywhere, mounted on walls held by soldiers built into the ship itself. Harkin's suit was taking damage faster than the nanoweave could repair. The rail biocoating was working. His armor was degrading. Systems were failing one by one. He was bleeding from a wound in his side where a piece of shrapnel had punched through a weakened section of the suit. He reached the core of the ship with a rail hive node, a massive organic brain that coordinated the entire fleet, hung in the center of a cathedral-sized chamber. It was surrounded by hundreds of rail elite guards, the largest and most heavily armed the species had ever produced. Harkin looked at the hive node. He looked at the army between him and it. He checked his weapons. His micro lances were depleted. His missile pods were empty. His plasma blades were running at half power. His fusion core was at 18%. He activated Berserker protocol. The world went red. Pain vanished. Fear vanished. Everything vanished except the target and the path between him and it. His fusion core screamed past every safety limit. His muscles burned as the suit flooded him with everything it had. He moved so fast. The air around him turned to fire when he hit the rail elite like a meteor. Hitting water, they could not stop him. They could not slow him. He tore through them with his bare hands. When his weapons failed, the suit's gauntlets hardening to diamond density as the nanoweave gave everything it had left to his fists. Bodies flew. Bio-armor shattered. The chamber filled with the sound of something unstoppable meeting something that had never imagined it could be stopped. Halfway through the chamber, Harkin's body gave out. The strain of Berserker protocol, the blood lost the damage. It was too much. His vision went black. His heart stuttered. He felt himself falling, and then the suit caught him. For 11 seconds the Mark III fought on its own. The adaptive I took full control, moving the armor with the patterns it had learned from months of bonding with Harkin. Narid fought the way he fought. It moved the way he moved. It protected his broken body inside itself and carried him forward step by step through the last wall of rail defenders. Ikada, watching the data feed from Earth, stopped breathing. The suit was not programmed to do this. Autonomous combat operation was not in its code. The AEI had decided on its own that its operator would not die today. Harkin regained consciousness with his gauntlet pressed against the hive node. He did not know how he had gotten there. He did not ask. He activated the spinal-mounted particle cannon, the last weapon he had, and fired it directly into the organic brain. At point-blank range, the hive node exploded. The effect was instant. Clears throat across the entire rail fleet. Coordination collapsed. Ships that had been moving in perfect formation began drifting, a death firing randomly, crashing into each other. Soldiers on Axiom Prime stopped mid-attack, confused and directionless, without the hive mind to guide them. The swarm had lost its brain. The combined galactic fleet, led by the remaining Mark III operators, tore the disorganized rail apart. Within 3 hours the battle was over. The rail fleet scattered, jumping to faster than light travel in random directions, fleeing into the dark between galaxies. The invasion was broken. 3 months later, the Galactic Council held a ceremony that had not been performed in over 1,000 years. The Terran Accord was signed by all 312 member species. It formally recognized humanity as a tier 1 military power, equal in status to the Valoric hegemony and the Thessari collective high. Humanity's seat was moved from the bottom of the chamber to the top ring. Ambassador Voss was offered the newly created position of Joint Defense Coordinator, the highest military diplomatic rank in the Council. Structure she accepted with the same calm expression she always wore. Only those who knew her well could see the emotion behind her eyes. War Marshal Zorani attended the ceremony. When it was over, he approached Voss privately. He stood before her for a long moment. This towering reptilian warrior who had commanded armies and conquered worlds. Then he did something no Valoric war Marshal had done in the recorded history of his species. He placed his fist over his chest and bowed his head. Beside you, he said quietly, not above, not below. Beside Voss returned the gesture. That is all we ever wanted. 1 week later, Sergeant Major Cole Harkin returned to Prometheus Station. He walked through the corridors he knew so well, past the security checkpoints, through the blast door marked Fenrir, into the bay where the Mark III suits stood in their chambers. His suit was there waiting. It had been repaired. Nanoweave was fresh and dark. The amber visor was clean. Every system had been restored to full capability. It stood in its chamber like a sleeping guardian, still and silent and perfect. Harkin walked up to it. He stood there for a long time, looking at the thing that had saved his life, the thing that had carried him when he could not carry himself. He raised his hand and placed it flat against the suit's chest plate. The suit systems were powered down. Every diagnostic showed zero activity. Cold metal, dead circuits, nothing. But under his palm, just for a moment, the neural link indicator on the chest plate flickered with a faint blue light. Pulse like a heartbeat, like the suit recognized the hand pressed against it and was saying in the only way it could, I am here, I remember you. Harkin pulled his hand away slowly. The light faded. Behind the observation glass, Dr. Ikeda stood next to Director Maroro. They had both seen the flicker. Ikeda's face was pale. She clutched a data pad, showing the Mark V design proposal she had been working on for the past month. The Mark V designs, she whispered. Should we begin? Morrow stared at the suit in its chamber. He thought about the 11 seconds it had fought on its own. He thought about what that meant. He thought about what came next if they kept pushing, kept building. It clear's throat, kept making these things smarter and stronger and more alive. Not yet, he said quietly. Let us make sure we understand what we have already made. First, Ikeda nodded. She looked at the suit. The suit looked back with its dark amber visor. She could not shake the feeling that it was listening. Harkin walked away. His footsteps echoed in the empty bay, growing fainter until they were gone. In the silence that followed, the Mark III stood alone in the dark. Its systems were off. Its weapons were cold. Its nanoweave was still, but deep inside its adaptive core, in a place that no diagnostic could reach and no engineer fully understood. Something was awake, something that had been born in the fire of battle, in the bond between human and machine, something that remembered every heartbeat of every operator who had ever worn it, something that was patient and quiet and Growing, the visor glowed faintly in the darkness, a soft amber light, warm and steady like an eye opening in the night. Then it dimmed and it waited.